Welcome back to the Deliberate Exchange podcast. This is Chelsea, and I'm so glad that you're here. So, I thought that this would be a good time to introduce myself a little more formally, share my backstory, and explain what inspired me to start this podcast in the first place. So, the formal part. My name's Chelsea. I'm otherwise known as the Deliberate One. I'm a stress and confidence coach specializing in sober living and starting over after big life changes. I help high achieving women break free from stress and self doubt and burnout through breath work, nervous system regulation, and transformative self care. My mission is simple. I want to help you live deliberately and thrive unapologetically. So that's the formal part. But I wasn't always this woman talking to you right now and in this role and in this capacity. And it's absolutely not all that I am. So before I got into the wellness space, I was actually working in commercial construction as a project manager. And I did that for 16 years. I learned from scratch because my family's business wasn't in construction. It was in cars and racing. And in my time in construction, I worked on a lot of really cool projects, and I was really good at what I did. And I felt like I had a certain job security. But it was also hard work. Learning in a male-dominated industry was absolutely a challenge. And later in my career, the industry events and outings made for late nights, and the pressure to be on more often than not was a lot. In what felt like a short period of time, I also experienced a lot of big life events. So in 2017, after 13 years together, I had decided that I wanted a divorce from my husband. This was hard. Of course, it was what I wanted, but hurting somebody else, disrupting what I thought like life was going to be like, was painful. And with that was also the uncoupling, right? Selling the house, deciding who got what, living together but not being together while we sold the house was awkward and again, very painful. And then I had to find a new place to live and recognize for the first time I'd be living on my own. And so that was exciting and scary. Before I had lived with my mom and then went to live with my soon-to-be ex-husband at the time. What I also didn't quite contemplate is that this one decision would then create space for other decisions to be made, like giving up our dog. We had agreed that I would take Mowgli, this cute little Chihuahua Yorkie mutt, in the divorce. And we did that at first, but with my constant work schedule, I wasn't giving him the time that he deserved. So I made another gut-wrenching decision to give him to my ex full-time. And my ex was working from home and I knew would be taking amazing care of him. So it was the right choice, but it was really, really hard. And from 2017 to 2019, I'm learning about living alone. I'm cooking meals for one, killing bugs all by myself. It was great. But I also threw myself more into work. So there were more late nights, more early mornings. And what I wasn't quite prepared for was the crippling loneliness when I got out on my own. And with that loneliness was also guilt that I was even feeling lonely in the first place. I was, after all, the one who chose this. I was the one that wanted this, didn't I? And so I would tell myself to suck it up and, go with what I had chosen. My solution to combat the loneliness was to go headfirst into online dating. And so with a relatively fragile self-worth, no standards, no expectations, I went into it. And it was a perfect storm of shitty guys and situationships that never made me feel worthy, never made me feel appreciated, and would just cut away at the already fragile cord. In this period, I was also leaning on alcohol to combat the hard feelings, and also because I felt like it was really super sophisticated to open a bottle of wine and pour a glass at the end of a long day of work. something that could finally let me breathe after all I had seen it in the movies, and it just seemed like the natural thing to do. Stress was high, self-care was low, and in hindsight, of course, these were the warning signs. But I kept going because that's what I do. I'm good at just keeping on, keeping on. In 2019 came another blow. So early in the year, my stepdad, who is literally the best man ever, the one who really took on the dad role for me, was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. Now, I remember being out for drinks with an industry colleague when my brother called and told me this news. And in a fit of tears and disorientation, I left the bar hurriedly. I just needed space. And it's not like I went home to my folks, but I went to my house and I cried and I worried about what this all meant. And then I learned more. They had told us 2 years, and we were all very optimistic. There would be surgeries, there would be chemo, there would be radiation, and he'll, hell bent on getting the best out of this. And in a quiet moment, just the two of us, my dad told me that I was the one that had to keep it all together, to be the strong one. No pressure there, right? And so I tried to do that. And I kept working full time and living in Toronto and running a job site out in Waterloo and driving back to my parents almost on a daily basis to shuttle them to the hospital for treatments or surgeries or emergencies. I got to know Sunnybrook and Oshawa General Hospital really, really well. Like, I knew all the best routes to get there, and I knew how to navigate the complex hallways. I took notes about the side effects to expect, things to look out for in him with the medication or the surgeries and the aftercare. I helped my mom prepare the drugs. I was very keen on making sure they were comfortable. I did everything that I could, and it was exhausting. So the high stress and the overwhelm and the exhaustion and the need to keep all of the balls in the air meant that the drinking was becoming way more frequent and the consumption was actually getting pretty high. And I was still online dating. So I was truly trying to do the best that I could at the time. And 8 months after his initial diagnosis, 8 months of watching his body deteriorate and his mobility decline, my dad made the ultimate and brave decision to ask for medical assistance in dying. And we, as a family, picked a date, marked it in our calendars, which is a very weird thing to do. Like, what do you even put in the calendar for that? And we waited for November 25th of 2019 to come. We were preparing for that day, the parade of people coming in to say goodbye and to pay their respects. The undercurrent of sadness, but also trying to keep it light, was pretty taxing. And on the 25th, it was as surreal an experience as you can imagine. I'd never watched someone take their last breath, to go from literally being here one moment and gone the next. And it's something that I'll get into in another episode because it was a profound experience and one that I wasn't prepared for my own reactions. But, like I said, 1 minute he was there and then the next he was gone. And I had to start picking up the pieces of my already grieving and already broken heart. So it was in this time that I was starting to recognize that I needed some more therapy. I recognized that I had some destructive habits that were happening. And I'm trying to write a couple of courses at work, dealing with HR to do that and to get my life back on track. And in January of 2020, after my therapist challenged my relationship with alcohol, I quit drinking for good. And she had urged me that if I had any withdrawal symptoms to stick my hands in a basin of ice water. I thought that was a really compelling idea, and so I Googled more, as one does. And eventually I discovered Wim Hof, who had a particular philosophy for harnessing the cold to create resilience, and a breathing method to alchemize and move energy, especially stored stress and trauma. And so I signed up immediately for a fundamentals course the very next weekend. And it was this intense breath work where I sobbed and I released for literally a few hours and then got in a cold plunge for 3 minutes. And it felt incredible. I felt peace and I felt light after feeling chaos and literally so heavy, so weighed down for so long. And I was hooked. Then in February of 2020, so I'm still feeling pretty good about my choice not to drink, looking at retreats to take to kind of further this exploration, I end up getting unceremoniously fired. Walked out of the building, kind of fired. It was humiliating and demoralizing and a massive blow to my ego. And I had no idea why. I wasn't somebody who got fired. Like, at least I didn't think I would be. And I was also thinking, like, I was the one that made everyone Valentine's Day cards the week before. But I now can see in hindsight, and not that this is why I got fired, but I was also quick to judge and I was snappy with others, which was, as I've come to learn, the telltale sign of burnout. And that was like the first and only time that I thought, you know what, screw it, let's just have a drink. Right? I'm just a couple weeks sober. I called my good friend Steve and he came over knowing full well what kind of choices I'd be making or potentially making after getting fired just a few months after watching my dad die. I did not drink that night because I didn't want them to take that from me. That was mine and I wasn't going to let anything compromise it. Now, I could have gone back to work in the industry again. I could literally be hired the very next day, but I didn't. I entertained job offers in the industry and opportunities, but I felt a very strong pull to decline, and I did. And so then in March of 2020, we all know what happens, COVID. And a lot of people will spew some bullshit about like the time that we don't talk about, but we're going to talk about it in other episodes because it is a very pivotal point in our lives. So 2020, it's a global pandemic. Stay in your homes. And I'm living alone in Toronto. I'm cripplingly lonely. I'm unemployed. I'm dealing with compounding grief, and I'm working at staying sober. Like, somebody get me off of this ride. It's too much. Instead of letting it consume me, though, I leaned into my healing. More breath work, more learning, more evolution. I felt shifts start happening. I started to take better care of myself. Momentum, glimmers of hope and happiness. The self-worth is building. I decided ultimately that I'm not going back to the industry. And following another universal ping, I decide I'm going to get into the wellness space. And then I decide that I'm going to move back in with my mom. You know, it's a pandemic and we could support each other. And my hometown felt comforting in that sense. And so I start learning more about how to help people, making a choice to start my own business. And I'm still healing, still growing. I end up coming across amazing mentors and coaches along the way who truly catapulted me into where I am today. And from this space, I wanted to do things from intention. I felt like I had lived a really large portion of my life on autopilot, doing things because I thought I should or to check boxes. The desire to live with intention, to be deliberate, is actually what created and became the deliberate one. And from that was also the mission to help prevent women from experiencing the same level of depression, anxiety, loneliness, hopelessness that I had experienced. I wanted to help others find clarity and purpose. I wanted to help them find an identity outside of the titles that they were given or had earned, right? Because I had put all of my eggs into one basket of being the perfect employee, and then that was, as I mentioned, unceremoniously ripped away from me. I wanted to teach people that you can be more than that. And as you can understand from the experiences that I've had in a short time, I developed a keen awareness on going through the big things in life and how to help people do that from a really grounded and resourced space. And there's also a lot of pride in helping others, in sharing my story. And as I was consistently growing and evolving, I saw that happen in others that I was helping too. And so we can press fast forward a little bit, and like there's a whole bunch of stuff that I missed in between there, but we can fast forward to wanting to start this podcast. Now, I've talked about this before, and you can go to episode 1 for this, that this has been on my radar for years, but I had literally kept letting fear get in the way of implementing it and just going for it. And so I finally got out of my way and I reconciled the fear, right? Go back and listen to it again. And here we are. And so in the episodes to come, and as this journey unfolds, I'm going to go deeper on some of the stories that I touched on today. I'll go into the hard lessons, I'll go into the doubts, the massive wins, the self-discovery, and give you some of the how-tos and pointers along the way of how I got through it. And I hope that you can take even 1% from each of these episodes and apply that into some area of your own life. And so if this episode resonated with you, leave me a review or a rating. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Share this episode with somebody who might need a little nudge or who could benefit from hearing my story. And also send me a message too. If you heard a portion of my story and you want me to expand on it or hear more, let me know. And of course, let me know of any other topic that you'd love for me to cover. Thank you so much for being here. I'll catch you on the next one. And in the meantime, breathe it in, be deliberate, and please be good to yourself.